Welcome to the ThinkSpace podcast with myself, John Staskowski, and Danny Massaro. Our goal with this podcast is a simple one. We discuss and dissect a prescient topic, issue, or theme that we think is interesting and might help us humans better understand why we think, feel, and do what we do. If you'd like to engage in these types of conversations too, you can check out thinkspace.academy for a unique cohort-based course that will help you think critically and live authentically. Hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, so this episode, Danny, we're going to have a chat about a 4-part documentary by the UK filmmaker Adam Curtis called The Century of the Self, which he made in 2002, so it's 20-year-old now, which is pretty terrifying. Can get it, if you're in the UK, you can get it on the BBC. It's on the iPlayer and just like the on-demand services, but you can watch it on YouTube as well. Basically what it is, it's like I say, a 4-part documentary, primarily focusing on the work, initially, of Sigmund Freud, who was the founder of psychoanalysis, and he was the dude who basically came up with this concept of the self back in 1900. And Curtis then takes it on from there, where you have Freud's nephew, a guy called Edward Bernays, who was the founder of PR, so public relations, who really takes up Freud's work in the 1920s and brings it to America. And really at the core of this whole thing is this belief that human beings are driven, so we are driven by these inner feelings, and we're quite irrational in that. So we've got these inner irrational forces and desires that are really guiding how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. Basically what Bernays, using Freud's theories, was saying was, look, you need to be able to control these and manipulate them for the good of society. So unsurprisingly, governments, corporations kind of cottoned onto this, and Curtis essentially shows through the 4 parts of the documentary how consumerism then comes about, how corporations use these theories to really shape the way that we think and the way we live. And then we'll see how it then impacts on politics as well. Curtis shows us that in the 4th episode. So it's a really interesting, probably sounds a little bit drier than it is the way I've described it, but it's a really interesting 4-part documentary that we'd recommend everyone has a watch of. And it's just something that we both enjoy watching. We watched it a few years ago and we've rewatched it recently for the purposes of this podcast. And we just think it's a really interesting bit of work that we can maybe tease some interesting insights out of for just how we're going about living our lives at the moment. Danny, do you want to kick us off with, I don't know if you were going to give us a 4-part overview, or do we just dive into part 1 and then see where we end up?
Yeah, we'll go into part 1, I think. Just for me, the last few podcasts and listening to a few bits and going back that we've done, we mentioned the century of self a lot, and I think because a lot of the philosophers and the ideas that we've talked about are from philosophers and researchers from the 20th century, and this documentary is something that sort of explains the central sort of psychology of most people in the Western world, at least, have gone with their sort of unconscious or mildly conscious psychology of, well, instead of thinking about others, like we talked about with Simone de Beauvoir, who said the ultimate freedom was getting to the stage where you live for others as much as you live for yourself. And she caricatured those 5 ways of being. And Nietzsche as well, that was very much about the self and Übermensch and be this and so on. The way that the 20th century did pan out was an inward turn back into me, my desires. How's it going down for me? What are my products? Who are my friends? What are my concerns? What do I want? And this is a documentary that tries to explain, quite biasedly, but Adam Curtis is very biased and admits he is that, tries to explain how politics, how governments, how ideas, psychologists, science researchers, how things all sort of came together to slowly turn, particularly America and then Britain, into consumers, and how we've got to where we've got now, where we are very much self-centered people, and our fundamental thing isn't to think of others straight away. It's all about myself. And one of the proposals is that the fallout of all of that is that politics has turned into basically pandering to individual desires instead of having grand ideas about where the world can go, and that marketing and politics and focus groups and finding out what people secretly want and tapping into that is what really should drives the world. But the ultimate downside of that, which we'll get to, is what's the psychological fallout of that to people when you are always in your own world and always worried every second of every day about you and your moods and the importance of you over the importance of others, predominantly, and sharing, and probably more social, more liberal type stuff. Then what's the actual fallout mentally of that? And that can be things like anxiety, loneliness, and so on. Because when you can't get your fill, when you're not fulfilled, or you get everything you want, all your satisfactions, all your desires, and you still feel a bit lonely or a bit anxious, and you keep needing more, where do you go from there? And that links into meaning. How you feel.
I think that bit will probably resonate with most people more. So in the first episode, it's very much based around, you've obviously got Freud's ideas of the inner self and these irrational forces that are driving us, and he really frames it around that consumerism element, where Edward Bernays gets involved and goes, all right, I've got these ideas, I'm going to take these to America and basically show them to governments and corporations on, look, this is how you can control people and get them to buy your stuff, essentially. He's a proper interesting character, Bernays, when you...
Yeah.
I'll just look before, he lived until he was 103. And when you see the way that Curtis breaks it down, there can't be many people who had a bigger influence on society and culture. Not overtly, where he's like a famous...
Yeah.
A lot of people won't have even heard.
Like a Muhammad Ali or someone like a John Kennedy, something. Yeah.
He wasn't the guy on the billboards, was he? But
No.
I don't think many people can have had a bigger impact on just the world or a century at least.
Obviously, his ideas came from his uncle, from Freud himself, and at the real seed of this, Freud said that we aren't totally rational beings. We have what's called the subconscious, and the subconscious basically comes out of your childhood and how your childhood was, as well as your biology, sort of thing. And all these little underneath subconscious desires are suppressed by society, pretty much. And it's good job they've been suppressed in many ways, because otherwise we'd all just be wild animals, right? And with no order, and everything would be chaos and so on. So this thing became that if you went to see a psychoanalyst and sat on the couch, it's the old traditional lie down and sort of freewheel with your thoughts and really open up and sort of get in a trance, that Freud or the therapist could talk to your desires that you didn't know you had, or complaints. And this is the stuff like women would have penis envy, for example. My real subconscious is angry at man because I've never been this, or the big stuff about all the Freudian ideas about attachment to your mother and all these strange subconscious deep things that if we allowed them all on the surface, like I say, it'd all be bad. But when someone got ill or someone was having a bad time, Freud's approach was that, oh no, if we can talk to that part of you, that subconscious part, have a little word with it, calm it down, let it know that, it's not real and it shouldn't be doing that. Almost like then when after the session's over, you should feel better about yourself because you're not a whim anymore to these subconscious, powerful, irrational things underneath. So what ultimately that did, it worried the hell out of governments, because he landed in America with these ideas and they started to spread in the intellect and like, oh my God, people are actually crazy. People are nuts. And after the 30s and they'd seen what had gone on with the Nazis and gone on with people actually starting to do ridiculously horrible things to other humans after the war, which we saw in that, people were like, of course it's true. Look at that person. Look at those people there doing that to those people. They must be irrational because you wouldn't do that. So it's true. We are irrational beings. Oh my God. How are we going to control everybody and keep the lid on it? And that's where these ideas got into the highest level of government. And then that started to affect things like, social control, how you dope out the masses, how you market, how you advertise, how you send messages out and use media to basically keep everybody calm and not at whim to these irrational forces that apparently the subconscious was. And Bernays was the guy who was so good at influencing everybody and putting out these messages that in some ways worked. So it wasn't completely wrong, the idea of the subconscious, but it took over and started to influence everything. And it sort of was like, it's the only thing. And we'll find out later when we talk that it's not the only thing. There's other things going on.
Well, a big part of what he was doing, like I alluded to consumerism, part of his shtick really, wasn't it, that look, if you can stimulate these inner desires in people, so almost implant them, what we can then do is we'll actually satiate those desires with products.
Yeah.
So make them feel like they want a certain thing and then give them the product and then keep them quiet, keep them suppressed, and everyone will just keep a lid on all these, these inner demons that they've perhaps got going on underneath the surface. So it really was about mass control in a way, wasn't it? It was literally, we need to mass control populations through their thoughts. And I think Bernays called that the engineering of consent.
Yes.
That's how he termed it,
Well, one of these earlier examples, if we can give an example sort of things, so how we did it. So it was like one of the fears that the government had for finance and being popular and flowing money around and economics was that you would make loads of products and there'd be nothing, nobody would want to buy them. There'd be a surplus. So it's like, oh my God. So one of them was like cigarettes. So if they could get women to smoke, they were like, well, that's going to solve that because no women smoke. It's just what men did. So basically, Bernays came up with this plan of getting. He said that essentially we can create the cigarette as a symbol of power.
Freedom. No, it was a symbol of freedom, wasn't it?
Yeah, they called them torches of freedom, which was like we can women's desire really, really. Women want to be equal to men. Women want liberty. So what we can do, if they have got a cigarette. It's not the actual cigarette, the nicotine and all that bit. We can call them torches of freedom. So if a woman smokes, she's basically saying to the world, I am this. I am now free. You will not hold me back. Now I think that's a bit like tattoos nowadays, or various things when you're a teenager and you want to grow up. You get an earring or jewelry or you wear adult things. You try, because you can't express it verbally. One of the ideas is that you can express what you really want to say through your products. So I can't go around telling everybody I think I'm sexy and a bit risky, and if you got to know me, I've got this side of me. But I can buy a product that does that, or dress a certain way that kind of tells you that, because I don't actually know how to say it, and I haven't got the mechanism to. So what he did, he basically got on a feminist march in New York. He made sure that all the key feminists, plus he employed a few women in, the really like good-looking model type women, to go along and gave them all cigarettes to smoke. Went national news, and before you knew it, 3-4 years down the line, sales were as equal with the men on the women's smoking, because they became basically these torches of freedom. So that was a way in which Bernays basically controlled a lot of people. Now, so then obviously once that had worked, you can imagine what they then did with all the other products, home care products, alcohol, cars, blum, bum, bum. And that was the birth of that PR type subconscious selling.
There's a brilliant quote in there from a guy who, I think it's 1927, and he's at Lehman Brothers, so he's a Wall Street banker at the time. Paul Mazur, I think he was called.
Yeah, Paul Mazur, yeah.
Paul Mazur. So you've got, obviously, you alluded to it, you've got Bernays trying to move them from needs to desires, isn't it, when it comes to products? So it wasn't that, oh my God, the car's broken down, I need a new car.
Yeah.
It was, you've got a perfectly fine car sat there, but what you need is to now convey something else that you can do through driving around in a new, maybe more expensive or newer car. Paul Mazur says, so this is 1927, if you think, it's right at the start of the boom years, really, isn't it? And his quote in that, we must shift America from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want things. Even before the old have been entirely consumed, man's desires must overshadow his needs. It's a great quote, but just when he uses the word trained, that it literally was that they were training people to desire stuff and go out and buy it.
It was interesting. I watched, when I was watching that back, I think last week, this first one, I just watched a film about the guy who'd set up Vegas, basically, the gangster who basically got the casinos going. And he says in this line that we didn't build gambling casinos, we built excitement and risk. Said Vegas went massive because it said something about you if you'd been to Vegas, and it built this risk and excitement that people couldn't get. He said it happened to be that we did it through gambling, but that wasn't the thing. We didn't build casinos, we built experiences of excitement and risk. And that's what struck me with this. Up to that point, products had been sold and marketed as very practical. This will do this and this, but all of a sudden it became about desires. So one of the good examples wasn't it, the cake, the homemade.
Yeah, the egg, just genius. So I can't remember the company, but everyone will know. I just think is it Betty Crocker?
Yeah, Betty Crocker's. Yeah,
like the cake in a box, isn't it? Where just all the ingredients were in there. Chuck it in a bowl. You maybe had to add milk or water or something to it, and then before you know it, you've got a cake coming out the oven. But people weren't buying it, were they?
No, they felt guilty. So the real thing was, even though it's a good cake and it works, the mothers felt guilty because they weren't being mothers. So they went to him and says, "We've got this amazing thing. It's practical. It's so practical. Why is it not popular?" And we'll get to the groups bit, because it obviously has to spread as an idea and be culturally group. So although this is an individual thing, the group has to catch on to it. So because the group becomes powerful. So, what they're doing, I do. So you copy your peers. And he was also very brilliant at that. He didn't see people as individuals. He saw them as groups, basically. So he looked at this. They went to him and he said, "I know what you do. You just add an egg. Tell them that they have to buy their own egg and add the egg into the mix." And the whole adverts became like, add an egg. So she felt, the lady who was making it, like she'd baked the cake because she'd added her egg. Now, he said that was a subconscious Freudian thing about her own fertile eggs. The idea about the egg was that she could get practically involved, but it was a subconscious message to the husband and the kids, like, that this is, an egg as in her child eggs. So, which we go, that's a bit weird. How freaky is that? But obviously they're thinking of the subconscious. Adding your own egg, it's feminine, it's I'm a woman, I have eggs, this is my egg, that link. So this is what they were doing, and they were very, very successful at it.
That aspect of you're not really selling product, you're selling emotions, aren't you? So when you mention with the torches of freedom, Curtis says in the documentary, it is completely irrational to think that a woman feels freer by smoking a cigarette. But the fact is, when she smoked the cigarette, she felt freer. It's totally irrational, but that's how she felt. They were able to tap into these emotions and make people feel in certain ways through buying and doing certain things.
This is where I kind of like it. I mean, I'm not Freudian in any way, but you can't dismiss him out of the picture because there are some of these things are there. We aren't rational all the time. I work with athletes a lot, and the scientists came in and a lot of the you can be rational all you want with sport, but there's reasons and things going on. Sometimes you do behaviours secretly and privately, and you don't really know why. It's for it's not rational why you did that. You might smoke yourself on a night out. You might, but it's like a bit of a rebellious thing. I know people who like getting an alcoholic blowout. It's like, or buying something that's out of character. If you live a life where you're totally rational and you're an intellect and you're that kind of way, fine. But a lot of people don't think that is a full life. They want to take, like the gambling thing, they want to have a bit of risk, a bit of adventure, a bit of whether you believe or not that's underneath bubbling subconscious desires or not, and you've been marketed into it, or whether you just believe that that's just a personality who wants a bit of a shake up. They get a bit bored. But the point is, we're not all rational. Everything we ever do isn't always rational. So when you just go, "Oh, stupid, look at them, what are they doing that for? Look at Nick Kyrgios at the tennis. Why does he do that? Why does he shout at his box? Nick Kyrgios, idiot, shouting at his box. Does he not know that's a distraction? That's a psychological weakness. And Well, he's just got to the final of Wimbledon, hasn't he? So he's not that bad. Oh, but I could make him better if I gave him the 4 concentration ideas I have. And it's like, really? The guy doesn't play tennis for the reasons you play it for. He's obviously into it for completely different reasons that make him tick. And they're not always, with him in particular, rational. And that's why I love this Century of Self documentary. It really gets you thinking and really stirs it up because it's history as well. And I think history is a story, and it's interesting, and you can see it you can see you in it, like you've gone through things, and and you can see yourself still in that story. So it's also, this documentary is just interesting. It's just entertaining. That's it. So part 2, that was about part 1, and it part 2.
So part 1 then, really, where it leaves us is we're at this point where you've got Freud's ideas now are kind of becoming mainstream, and you've got big corporations using them to really connect the dots between products and hidden desires. You've got them understanding, or at least thinking they understand people better, and they're now using these ideas to control and manipulate people with these psychological techniques. The other thing probably worth mentioning is it's like a perfect storm, isn't it? Because just as this is happening, you've got technology improving so that mass production becomes possible. So again, rather than products being just made on a as needed basis, you've now got corporations able to make these massive production lines of products where they can just churn out thousands and millions of them, just at the time where you've got people, now able to tap into and create these hidden desires that people want feeding, essentially. So it's very much gone from repressing and controlling that inner self and keeping it battered down to right now we're just going to feed these infinite desires with all these products that we're going to churn out.
And I think as it goes into part 2, Anna Freud comes in, doesn't she? Is that his granddaughter, is it?
No, so that's Freud's daughter, isn't it?
Freud's daughter, Anna Freud. She sort of takes it on as well, with in terms of she wants people to conform. So she thinks that in 1946, I think that she was close in the government as well, with Truman. They convinced Truman that basically people have got mental health problems. If these desires get out and start going a bit, too irrational, if the irrational fears, like a lid comes off and then they start behaving too irrationally, then you've got, once they start acting in mass forces, like obviously in the Nazis proved that once Hitler started to appeal to something subconscious in terms of mass power and they're evil and we can be super, and once that spread enough, they've been given an example of the masses basically being irrational through what they did, to the Jews basically, and how easy it happened. So then the Truman, they were basically really worried that could happen in America. It was like, right, let's nip this in the bud. The National Mental Health Act was born, and they were supposed to deal with this threat of an unstable illness. And psychiatrists were professionalized. They did loads of marriage guidance counselors, and they wanted social order. They wanted people to conform, control the fire of your emotions, get the regulatory part of your brain winning over the emotional side. Get logical, see sense. Don't go off on one, be a good person. And Anna Freud was like one that tried to do that a lot through her ideas of how to bring children up. So she actually did an experiment with her friends' kids of basically, anytime they did anything wrong or anything, she was just, no, that's wrong, conform, be a good person, conform. And she believed that would basically take out, eventually, it'd beat down the irrational and it'd strengthen the rational side. And this rational side had become so strong, he'd become so self-controlled, British stiff upper lip, for example, that type of thinking. You'd become so rationally strong that it would be the gatekeeper to your emotions forever. You know what I mean? So you can basically logic your way out of any emotion, and because those emotions are very dangerous, and we can't all be having those emotions at the same time, because it's just the way you can't live. You can't have a society like that. So that's where they were coming from, mass control. At the same time, it shows in this particular chapter that the CIA were doing psychological experiments, literally trying to find out what the subconscious actually was and almost take people back to a baseline and get rid of the personalities. They were giving them LSD, they were doing brain zapping experiments. They were all in the background trying to learn how to basically level people to a behavioural flatline level where they could be manipulated by the government and by the politicians, not in a nasty way. It wasn't like we want you to be zombies. It's like we're doing it for your own good, because you don't want to be out of control to your emotions. You want to be rational and live a 2.4 life. You go to work, get a job, get married, have a dog, get a house. You don't want chaos in your life. Who would? You don't want too much emotions. We've got the future. We're democratic. We're equal. We're America. We're great. Now, what happened was, what they found out, what I felt was interesting, was that rather than the theory of it strengthening the rational mind, all this control and suppression, it actually basically didn't work at all. It just bottled things up. So you just bury it and it bottles up, a bit like when you push a ball underwater. Eventually it's going to come up through the surface and smack you in the face. So you either keep pressing and do more strict doctrines, more strict religion, believe even harder in rationality, and really go down that line and basically never ever let them emotions come out, or you accept that actually that wasn't the way to go and start to liberate yourself a little bit more, and that's how we get to part 3. But the CIA, at the end of it all, and there were 2 people on the documentary, and they say, at the end of all our experiments, which were mightily cruel, we realised that the human being is way more complex and intelligent and crafty than what we'd given it credit for. Which I thought was like, that was a sign of the times. It's quite shocking, isn't it?
Well, I thought that thread it's running through all the episodes really, but particularly in that one, he really digs down into that distinction between rational and irrational. Because you mentioned about the politics that comes in. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it very much was, look, this is how they were talking about, this is how we view human beings. And then that meant how you view democracy and capitalism and stuff like that. So you had the camp where, I think it was Roosevelt was the president at the time, where it was like, no, people are rational citizens, they're active citizens, and they should have like an active role in deciding how society is run and, what policies are and all that type of stuff. And you had the Bernays camp on the other side still going, no, you can't trust, these are all just irrational, passive consumers. You can't trust the word they say. We've got to tell them what to think. And it was like, it got down to that view of, well, what is democracy? Is it almost just a sham where people have the perception that they can vote and they can choose, where really it ends up going that way, that they don't. It's like, no, we're going to tell you what you think you want and need and what you're going to desire, and then you'll give us what we want as politicians and as capitalists, etc. And he really, he really makes that distinction, doesn't he? That I still think is relevant, probably even more relevant today when you look at politics.
Yeah, I think you're starting to now get into the territory of individual desires. So psychotherapy, psychoanalysis. Sorry, it was criticised by Arthur Miller's in the documentary, and he says, well, why not suffer? Why not allow people to have some suffer? Why not allow them to be miserable or sad for a few days? What's wrong with the full emotional states of being human? Which you go back to, all the philosophers and Schopenhauer and other ones, even Plato and Socrates. You should have all the emotions. Life's not one big happy, constant happiness thing. It was seen as an outside attack on the internal freedom of a person, really. Because we were like, oh, we've got to control everybody, so we can force control from the outside. And what started to happen was that psychoanalysis then started to look like a very repressive form of social control. And they basically tried to adjust everybody to an average baseline psychology. And we see that, nowadays, we see that in a lot of things in books like, Models and the Happiness Project, or the 10 ways to, show gratitude, or the clean diet, the vegan way, everything. A lot of these books now are like, they've simplified it down to make you go, just follow this step process. There's no ambiguity or complexity. If you just follow this process, you'll be happy and fine. You won't get sad, and you won't get this, and this is the way to go. So everybody's, you know what I mean? Like, because what happened from this was that people, the next episode, part 3, which is called There is a Policeman Inside All Our Heads and He Must Be Destroyed, was basically, let's not push the emotions down. This was more like the hippie movement, the rise of the self-help movement in the California in the 70s, and all these Esalen and all these types of therapists came out, where, no, free the self. don't be repressed down into yourself, like be a good person. Go let the emotions fully out and you be the person you are supposed to be, because you are worth it and you deserve it and you've got unlimited potential, and you need to drop all your baggage, let all the emotions out and be who you can be. So part 3 starts with Tony Robbins, who's the quintessential 80s self-help guru that's still going to this day, and drove a lot of the psychology of the 1980s and onwards, of which I myself got into loads.
And well, this episode really, it's like the fight back, isn't it? So you get this, it goes 360 where people now start rebelling against consumerism and going, no, we don't all want to be the same, and we want to have our own personalities, we want to express our own individuality. So it's very much that mid-60s counterculture, isn't it? You had a lot of protest kicking off, anti-Vietnam War and all that stuff was floating around politically as well.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a rebellion against corporate
America
and that social control, which is the policeman inside the head that he's talking about. And it gives Bernays and the boys a bit of an issue, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, no, we've got all these bloody mass-produced products here that we need you to want and buy off us.
Yeah.
And people were turning around and going, no, I don't want to look the same as everyone else. I don't want to drive the same car or wear the same clothes or listen to the same music that you're trying to make me listen to through films and product placement and all that stuff. It was very much like a line in the sand, and it kicks off a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Films like, I love the film, the Christmas one, It's a Wonderful Life, all seen as just, this is basically be a good person and control yourself, and in the end you'll be rewarded for a happy middle of, be the guy, be the main guy. Don't be the rebel and go off and do your own. Be the dutiful guy who looks after. So that's a message. But yeah, the hippies, you see the typical footage, don't you, of dancing around naked and smoking drugs and doing what you want and free man, and then obviously you got to tie in drugs, so people were starting to get more LSD, more drugs, and that changes perception. So when you take drugs, your perceptions change and you see a different way that the world can be, and that could be actually a good thing. I mean, you're seeing at the moment ideas of therapy now, and we're all this time 50, 60 years ahead of that, 70 years. You're seeing now how MDMA and LSD and these microdosing of these can actually open up the mind and help, because some of these visions are helpful. But then in 40 years, we'll probably look back at this time and go, what were they doing? Like we're doing. Curtis will be making something then. But what I mean is the opening of perceptions and perhaps new ways to be. And there's nothing wrong with personal expression. You don't have to live in a house. You don't have to buy products and bake cakes and go to get a job. You don't have to basically be a pawn in a government system. You can be a lot more. And that subconscious side of yourself is there to actually help you as much as it's there to hinder you. So let it out, let it express. And therefore, a lot of the footage are things like, people in these seances and group therapy sessions where they're shouting or getting naked, and all normal forms of behaviour are starting to collapse. And you're watching it thinking, God, they've gone a bit extreme, but they're really trying to get this emotional youth out of themselves and kill all the childhood baggage that they were put on by the fathers and mothers and society, and get free and be a free spirit. But actually, what was going on really there, it was just self-indulgence. And what one guy called it, who was into it at the time, looking back, great. It was good on the guy with the beard, who's brilliant. He said, basically, looking back, we were just doing socialism for the self. We thought we were being really hippie and liberal and freeing to the whole thing. But basically, we were just going further into our own or our own ego and desires, really. We just wanted to be free, which was no different than somebody wanting to bake a cake, because someone had told them to do it, in the house. We were just it was just another form of driving towards our own self-actualization and our own self-satisfaction.
Do you think it's more like that now? Because it becomes very much the age around that period about that human potential movement, doesn't it?
Yes.
Personal transformation, taking control, autonomy, owning your freedom, express your true inner self, all that stuff. I wonder if it's probably more like that even now, because the beauty of it was, like I said, you got Bernays and the corporations are starting to panic because, like we said, we've got all this mass-produced stuff we need to sell, but people were no longer behaving like predictable consumers. You can't, if you don't know what they're going to want and everyone's different, how can you possibly service everyone's needs?
They worked it out pretty quick, didn't they?
Well, there was an interesting example in there. I don't know if you picked it, where they had the guy on and he starts talking about life insurance. He had like college graduates just stopped buying life insurance.
Yeah.
And he was kind of saying that, if all you're doing is living in the present moment for your own self and your own needs and your own desires, you're not really bothered about the future.
No.
It just doesn't even exist. So people were no longer going to spend money on stuff. Well, why do I need life insurance? I'm just living for me now in this moment.
The irony was, if you think about it, like this, most people listening to this might, I'd say, know who Abraham Maslow was, Maslow's needs. Okay. And, the popular gift now, it's like warmth, shelter, social love, and all these things. And at the top of the pyramid was self-actualization. And he said, Maslow, very, very, very popular psychologist and influential, going through all the universities and so on. So his thing was people want to self-actualize ultimately once they've got all the basic things met, like they can eat and they can survive. And so self-actualization became the religion. Everything became around I can be something. So, we've talked on this podcast a lot about facticity and transcendence. It became about the transcendence bit a lot. Yeah. Move on, make something who you can really be. Find your one passion, find the thing you were put on this earth to be. Go and be a spaceman, go and be a teacher, go and run a business, go and live in the woods on your own. Do what you were born to do, really self-actualize, become. So obviously this is coming through from the 60s and then just went absolutely mega in a massive thing in the 80s, where you started to see celebrity, you started to see people openly coming out and saying, like, showing off their wealth, if it was that. It wasn't scared to be, I'm greedy. I can have 10 yachts. I can have 10 this. And then it's trendy. It's, you wish you had what I had. So slowly, the collective disappeared. And it became truly about socialism for the self. It was like no community really, just self-satisfaction. You might say that you are doing it for society, but ultimately you're trying to make as much money as you can, you have as many experiences as you can, and it's all basically about you. Now, that's not going to be totally like that. You're all still going to be a brother and a friend, and you're going to do something for others, but the predominant underlying psychology is, I am the most important thing in this universe, in my universe. I am the centre of the world, and I've got to get going, and my experiences count above all else whilst I'm here. Now, that might seem normal to us now. It's like, yeah, well, that's normal.
Well, that's because that was the genius of capitalism, because they looked at that and they've gone from, oh shit, no one's buying all this stuff we're making now, to, hang on, why don't we just make them stuff that helps them be able to express their unique individuality? And it went full circle again. And then up it ramped, like you say, the 80s kick in, celebrity culture, and it's just like another boom time, isn't it? Everything kicks off again to feed those desires.
So then it became like, right, Nike, or we're selling shoes, or we're doing flowers, or we're doing cars, and everything basically then, for those, they called them inner directives. Yeah. They got a name for them. They called them inner directives, and this is what happened in Britain as well. So people started to say, I will decide what makes me happy, not you. So there's a great section in Britain, I think it's part 3, and they're in the 80s, and they're sat in 3 different houses in an housing estate, and they've got like marble bloody taps and kitchen and Italian leather, and they said, why have you bought all this? And it's like, well, I just want to be different. I just want to be a bit individual. I don't want to be like everyone else, because we're moving up in the world. And then they go to all these different houses, and they're all selling the same things. Oh, look at this fur. It's from this marble's Italian, and look, no one else has got that. So yeah, everyone has a marble kitchen, but they don't have the Italian version. So everything became a lot then about limited edition as well. And even the hippies, that guy was saying, look, I ended up buying these types of Converse shoes because they were multicoloured and nobody else had them, you know. I started getting into music that nobody else was really into because it was like, I'm different than you. So everybody, when I used to, I mean, this is ironic, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, also was born in this time, something I've studied in. And one of the things I remember doing NLP was that people are mainly sameness people with difference. You get people who just live and want difference. You get people who live and just want same. So they go on the same holidays, eat the same foods, you know what I mean? Like just metronomic, same. Some people are different for different sake. Just constant variety. But I think it's like 10% at each side. 80% of people are sameness with difference. They want the same things with a twist. And that's why you've got 40 brands of Kit Kat. That's why soap operas, Coronation Street will go on for another 100 years, because it's the same thing with different characters. People think they're having different things all the time. It's just that the product people are just tweaking it. Oh, a new flavour of that. Oh, a coffee with this, you know, Starbucks, Costa, everything's the same basically, but we're just twisting it. And that's where these marketing people and Bernays said, right, if they want to be in the directives and they want to feel special and they want to feel different and unique and self-actualized, give them the things that make them think they are. They want a private reg on the car, make one for them. They want a tattoo that's done in this way, make them feel like, and make another one. They want a holiday that has these bells and whistles on it, that you get a free this and a bit of this, and you get all inclusive at breakfast. Give them that, because they'll tell all their mates that they're living the life because it's a bit different. And you're right, John. Yeah, I think nowadays that's gone hyper. It's like what all the ways I can conform and keep up with everybody. But whilst I'm doing it, just put a little twist on it to show that I'm actually doing it just a little bit uniquely. When actually you're just a Snapchat victim, or you're just a victim to the technology of Instagram. Because wherever you go, all you can now see is potential pictures you can post. You're a bit literally a zombie to the technology, but you actually think you're choosing to do it. That's what started with this product placement, this product specialism, and this is where Bernays' his legacy is, and why you probably said he's influenced people as much as anyone. So it's personal PR, isn't it, as well?
Well, that's where they really ramped up the whole, like market segmentation, and lifestyle marketing became a thing, didn't it? Where they really started tapping into. So you mentioned the inner directives. There's a whole different list of them, isn't there? Where they're not really separating you now on things like social class anymore. It's all about psychological needs. And they have I think one of the examples they show is like the surfers, and it's like, right, if you're into surfing, there's all these different things and emotions that kind of typify you. These are the products that they want, and it goes all the way through. I think there was a little bit later on, there was like the mainstreamers who they're all about security and belonging.
Yeah.
And then you had aspirers, where it was like status and self-esteem. Succeeders was all about having control. Reformers was again about self-esteem. So, that's where that really just went into overdrive. And it's like, right, what products do those people want? And then later on, as we see in episode 4, it wasn't just what will they buy, it was what would they vote for, wasn't it? So that's when politics really went, right, we're into this now. We're not just going to give them what we think they need.
Yeah,
we're going to find out what they want, and then we'll give them that, and we know they'll vote for us then.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's it. And that's the PR, the PR or social marketing became a massive industry. Yeah, and then you get all these you get all this research and intelligence subgroups, don't you? Then so you get focus groups, and you get a lot of, let's go to the people, get them to free think around, let's find out what they really, really, truly desire. Like when we're selling them a washing up liquid brand, right? And they're like, oh, they want a washing up liquid that looks sexy on the worktop. Surely, of all the things you don't want to look sexy is washing. No, they do. They want it to, because they've paid a lot for their Italian workspace. They need a washing up liquid that's got a sexy shaped bottle. You can't have the old fairy white one with we need a. Oh right, shit. So we were there busy making the best type of fairy liquid we could. But all you were really bothered about, because they're all pretty decent these days, is what the bottle was shaped like. You didn't know that, really. until we've free associated about it in a role play experiment, and we didn't know that. Right, that's what you really want. So that they took that approach to politics. So, and this is where, when you think about like Brexit and you think about Trump, the media and all the regular, whether they were comedians, Twitter people, media, journalists, whatever, nobody thought Brexit were going to happen. You know, they got a massive misread on what people actually wanted, which was probably a massive up yours, because there's nothing had been going on in politics. No one had had any decent ideas since Thatcher, because Blair had basically gone to everybody and said, what do you want? I'll be that. And did it. You want this, you want this, you want this. So Blair basically got in because he just pandered and found out what all these middle swing voters really.
Well, it was before that, really, wasn't it? If you think, so you've got this situation now where people are really embracing capitalism again because it helps them be themselves, essentially. And that really takes over. So we're into the 1980s now, and this is episode 4, essentially, isn't it? Where he follows, like Reagan and Thatcher. So obviously Reagan in Republican in America, and then Thatcher as a conservative in the UK, where essentially they just ran on individualism. So it all became about, forget government, we're not going to tell you what to do. We don't want to interfere in your lives anymore. You know what you want, we're going to let you rule. So it's like the individual became king, didn't it?
Yes, we're going to cut you loose, Reagan said, didn't he?
We're going to step back and just like, we're not going to tell you what to do. You have it, just go at it.
So we're going to give you what you think you want, which is to be free, individual. You know, we want to be free, we want to do what we want to do. Or, it was on a lot of films, weren't it? Freedom, and all became good. And that's what I mean. Britain weren't doing that. Thatcher was probably the last, but she didn't do it so much that. Thatcher came in and went, here's my idea, you're having it. And she was like the last one.
But she was still very much about you as the individual. One of her famous quotes, no one is quite like anyone else. She ran on those. I think we spoke about it in messages and stuff. I remember this in my mum and dad, 1980s. My dad was kind of up and coming, had his own business as a painter and decorator. So they were just loving it, going, they're going to give us all this individual freedom. It's all about, starting up, being self-starters, start your own business.
Yeah.
You do you and we'll help. When you look at their background, social background, they should have been dyed-in-the-wool socialists, Labour voters.
Yeah.
One, immigrant parents, the other just working class. And to them now, even still, they look at Thatcher and those governments, conservative government at the time, as like on a pedestal. It was that pure, they're going to let us be what we want to be and make the success of ourselves that we want to make.
Yeah, and in Britain, so obviously that became a lot about spending money and going for it, shopping centres, credit cards, going on holiday, having products and technology, so yeah, it was...
Owning your own home and all that stuff was a big part of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, your own home and setting the individual free, basically. So Curtis he's not criticising here. He's not saying this was all a disaster, by the way. He's saying individualism's great and it's terrible as well. It just depends how far you sort of take it. He's literally, to me, just making a commentary on what went on and why we are where we are now. And he's saying, I don't know if there was a better way to do it, and I don't know if there's been a worse. Either when you've gone fundamental on either way, most systems have a problem. But it's just interesting to see that what was actually going on and why we've got to where we've got. It just tells that story from a distance. But yeah, what happened was, because the Conservatives were so good with that, and the Labour was so way off it and behind the game, new Labour, Blair going, oh my God. And that's what I was saying earlier. Blair then literally did go to the swing voters, and they got all the marketing people, sat down with them, found out what they really want. And that's what I meant about Brexit. Nobody really, really went to people and went, what do you really want? And it were a bit, maybe some people went, I just want difference. I just want to tell the government to shape themselves. So I'm going to shock them if I can vote. Brexit, leave. Leave. My life's crap, leave. Maybe something exciting will happen and that'll wake them up. So a lot of it might have been around that, rather than just, the logical, rational things about whether it was good or whether it was bad to leave Europe. I mean, not many people knew, but they were making a point through the one chance to vote. So Blair, to be fair to him, got into these people and went, okay, so so one of the things people were most bothered about was local crime, rather than any national policies and this and that. And very things that were very local to their town. So he started coming on, going, and we're going to solve local crime. we're going to put policemen in your streets. Well, that'd be enough for like 300,000 votes, just that comment, because he was he'd found out these, people were thinking, why is he going on about this? We're all about social tax cuts no, because people were more bothered about that. So what he did, he pandered, and that's what apparently happened. And then is it the thing with Blair and the Iraq thing at the end?
I don't know if this would be, you'd say, oh yeah, this is fact, but this is the view that Curtis projects, where he says that basically Labour so Blair and that discover that really because it's those swing voters were the middle classes, really, weren't they?
Yes.
It was that middle kind of chunk of people.
And
they basically realised that people didn't want stuff that benefited society. They just wanted stuff that benefited them. Absolutely. And the way that they'd now been trained through Bernays and the culture over the preceding decades, they've basically been trained by corporations that you give us money and we give you the products that you want.
Yes.
And Blair and that realised that that's how they now view government. So it's like, we pay tax, not for the benefit of anyone else, but because you're going to then give me that back in what I want and how I want to feel and what I want to see. So that's what they did. And you're right, that's when you had the focus groups come in and it was just like, right, this is what they want. We're just going to give them everything. There's a few political commentators on there, isn't there, who kind of say, look, you just ended up with this massive hodgepodge of policies that made no coherent sense whatsoever on a national policy level. They were all just these random different things that the focus groups told them people wanted, and that's what they went with. So you were constantly then just chasing your tail, constantly trying to appeal to those whims and desires so the voters basically become a marketplace at that point, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, what do we need to market to you to get your vote?
Yeah, and apparently that it's been the same ever since.
Yeah.
The philosophy of politics has almost been the satisfaction of my desires has become the philosophy that propels society. So find out what they want, tell them we'll give it them, and then we'll get to that later, but once we're in office. Yeah. And then we'll even change it a bit. But to get in, let's just find out what they really secretly want. And that's where, Curtis makes the point. I've read him in an interview say that he thinks Thatcher and Reagan, in a way, would start, had the last kind of ideas, because they didn't necessarily do the focus groups. They went in with the idea of the self. The self happened, and then Labour, who were left behind because of the community manifesto and all of that, they were like, we haven't got time for community. We're all too busy enjoying ourselves. Haven't you noticed? A bit like Ireland when they flooded it with all that European money. The politics just went west, didn't they? I can't come to that meeting. I'm at the beach with my caravan having a barbecue. I'm having a good time here. So basically, it links to Nietzsche's point from years ago. Let's say years ago, when Nietzsche was around the end of the 19th century. One of his comments was, "We will get to a point where we will be so comfortable." Call it the last man. The last man will become so comfortable he will not care about anything apart from himself. So basically, there'll be no great new ideas. Nothing will be. It'll all be just about maintaining the balance of his desires and his satisfactions. And I think that's potentially why we're in a time in the world, so this is where you might look at it now and what does all this mean? You maybe have the fallout, what Curtis has said since, and he's done other documentaries, Hypernormalization, and very recently Can't Get You Out of My Head, which I'd heard, that's an 8-parter, which I'd recommend people watch if they have time. We'll talk about the documentary style in a second because they're just great. But the fallout of it, not only are individuals perhaps a bit bored of themselves, there's no meaning beyond themselves really and their own survival and their own secures. A lot of people are self-obsessed with their own well-being and my feelings and I'm not happy and I've not made my life a masterpiece, which is Tony Robbins' big mantra, make your life a masterpiece. I've not done that. I've messed my life up. I've not self-actualized. I've not got what they've got. I've made a mess of my life and all these things, kind of things. I'm not feeling very well. What's wrong with me? Oh, I've got well-being problems. I'm not winning at sport. I'm not number one. I must be terrible. So it's obviously a very internal self-reference sort of mindset where we've been hammered and still get put on. One of the fallouts of that is that you get a little bit down about things because there's no bigger purpose out there than you. So everything becomes a bit depressing and a little bit, And I know Adam Curtis did a really short documentary called Oh Dear, and he has this phrase of these oh dearists, He says, and everybody around, like he sees a lot of people nowadays, they're just, oh dear, there's another boat capsized in the Mediterranean. Oh dear, with refugees. Oh dear, there's Russia have done this. Oh dear, the world's going to blow up, because of global warming or whatever. Oh dear, the Americas, Trump's got in. And everything's this natural kind of, because nobody is generating new ideas. Nobody's really coming up with new future ideas to solve problems. They're all just frightened that they're going to die because they can't imagine a world without them in it. Because they're so me and my thing, I'm so insular that nothing in the world is beyond is anything worth beyond themselves. And society and psychologically, we've slowly gone there. And we alluded to this, didn't we, with de Beauvoir's episode last time, when she said true freedom is willing the freedom of others.
Yeah.
And this isn't going full social. This isn't going to the left, and fully, because all things. So he says there's no politics out there. There's nobody out there now coming up with any legitimately good new ideas to how to solve this self-indulgent dearness of everybody. Oh, the government's bad. This is bad. Get rid of Boris Johnson. Oh, well, this is going to be even worse. Get rid of Trump. Oh, we've got Biden. Well, that's even worse. Oh, the global warming, not rather than actually coming up with using it as an opportunity to use technologies and not only save the world, but invent a new way of being and a new social order in the world. It's like, no, let the scientists just tell us that we're all going to die. And all that makes you do is go, oh, shit, and maybe more into yourself and, I better get pissed while I can. I better, because it's all going to go wrong. So it's really interesting that just that general vibe of how perhaps we all, a lot of people in the West turned inward as the king of their own and queen of their own universes, and we're not really that social as we used to be, because we're constantly being pandered to and fed things.
Well, that's the fascinating thing about like I said at the start, it's 20-year-old now, but it doesn't feel at all dated. It probably feels even more relevant than when he made it at the time, just because of the way the internet went essentially since, in the last 20 years. So it's fascinating that you can trace what you've just described back all the way through, people like Bernays, who, like I said, has had such a massive influence on the way we live. But I found a nice little quote from Adam Curtis in an interview. It's not in the documentary. It was in an interview that he did that I think maybe summarises that and it's a useful thought provoker for people. He says that people in a consumer society probably have more fun, certainly have more things, and we find those things comforting, enjoyable, and who is to say there is anything wrong with that? But we have also perhaps become trapped by an idea and it's got into every corner of our lives. And I think it has that, like I said, trace it back to Bernays, that marketing, consumerism, commodification of everything. It really has. It's in every single part of what we do. And that, everything that we're exposed to, if you walk out your front door, you've suddenly just been bombarded with it all the time. So I think it's useful.
Like Amazon, isn't it? You get an email off Amazon. These are your preferences. They know what you are, and they just send you back into yourself. Have more of this. And you go, yeah, thanks, great. But they're basically controlling you.
Twitter at the minute, it seemed so better back in the day, but Twitter now kills me because most people have it on. You can view your tweets in chronological order, or you can just have it on. Basically, like your feed is Twitter's feeding you. So anything that you've looked at, Instagram works the same, the algorithm.
Yeah.
It's just feeding you what it thinks that you think you want constantly. So you've never been exposed to anything different. It's just feeding that personality and those desires constantly.
Yeah. Well, that takes out slowly. That takes out the complexity and the ambiguity of life, doesn't it? Now, I work with athletes, so that I keep saying, and to try and keep them balanced in this world, the biggest thing I could talk to them all the time about is it's complex. I haven't got the answers. I'm a psychologist. I can't, make you. We said the weekend with Rory McIlroy, how many psychologists were there ready to go on the final round to press send on the why Rory has made it after all these years. Oops, better not send that. He lost to Cameron Smith, who just flipping went on one. everyone has these neat things ready to like serve up, and I think that the complexity and the ambiguity is often gone from that. So I'll tell athletes, like, I'll hold your hand through it. I'll hold your hand through your experiences and what you're going to go through, but you've got to go through it. I haven't got anything that can solve it. And I know that might sound like stupid for a businessman, but which you could call me, but I'm not a businessman. I'm just saying, you don't have to work with me. I don't have to work with you, but I'm just trying to, I feel now, I don't have to work, for all of that. I'm just literally trying to get them comfortable, or in a way, perhaps shake them away from this solution-focused, constant, pandering to themselves. And I'm not happy till I win. That's a desire. Don't get me wrong. I mean, God, I hate losing and absolutely love winning, and I was competitive as anyone when we were touring with Laura and really wanted to win. But you have to get over yourself. You have to realise that you're heading for a really serious pitfall, because you're becoming way too up your own backside. You're becoming that serious man in a way about yourself from last week, or you're becoming, too stuck in it, and then you'll end up nihilistic because you realise that can't solve everything, and then you get fed up with everything. And I think that, just to finish, for me, with that what Adam Curtis does when I watch his documentaries, although he presents things in a very biased, quirky, with music, and really, he presents it in a way very typical, and he presents a story, and it's propaganda. It's his story. It's what he really thinks, using his evidence. But he's saying that. That's what it is. He's saying that up front. He thinks, journalists are telling you a story. But what the story does for me, every time I watch it, it gets me thinking. It gets me thinking. Now, there is a trap, because you can feel really pseudo-intellectual about it. You can watch these documentaries and start thinking you've done a 10-year degree in the history of Western civilization. All you've done is watch a television show. You haven't gone and actually... that doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it and be entertained. So for me, firstly, it's just entertainment. But what it then does, it gets me thinking, and it gets me reflecting, and it makes me aware of a few things. I've got to hold myself back from being too, I know everything, because he could be wrong on a lot of his points, and you could criticise him easily. But it's just like a really interesting way to understand that there is complexity and ambiguity going on. And there are forces outside of your control operating a lot of the time. Now, those forces that are outside of your control, like governments and social movements and psychologists coming in with life theories and marketing and technologies, they're not all there like nasty, evil things trying to make you worse or could totally control you. Some of them are genuinely trying to be there to make your lives easier, make your lives better, to free you. But some of them are more vindictive than that. Some of them are more controlling. So, what Curtis does, and he does it with hypernormalization, and it's a bit like he goes, this is what's been going on in the world that you probably wasn't quite aware about. Be aware of it a little bit more, but don't panic, right? But it's going on. And if you can get it a little bit and just be aware of it, it might help you to not be such fodder to it. But don't necessarily go the other way and get all paranoid and all, oh dear, and oh my God, we've got these nasty governments and all these nasty things. Because that would be just, not getting you anywhere mentally. You've got a great life. You're living in one of the best times ever of history. Try and see that. But have a look at the fluctuations in trends that happen over years. And I think, like you said, it's so fascinating to look back at a time you've lived in, like the 80s and the 90s, that you didn't notice it at the time, and you go, shit, that's kind of what was going on. I just thought that was how the world was. Fact. So it makes you a little bit more open to now that you're going through a bit of a movement. So you don't have to panic as much. Kind of helped me through COVID a bit, really. I just saw it as a phase in time, not the world's going to stop. It was like, well,
I remember us joking that, saying we're literally living through an Adam Curtis documentary.
Yeah.
We'd send each other stuff. You're like, he's definitely going to have this in his next one.
It definitely felt like that, didn't it? He's going to come on and he's going to do the COVID years and just after what happened. And because there is stuff going on, isn't he? He's going to make something up, but
I mean, I would just totally agree. I think there's no one better than him, certainly from stuff I've seen anyway, there's no one better than gets you thinking as critically as he does in such an interesting, light-hearted way. You can watch his work, just like you say, it's almost like a film, can't he? His entertainment. But he just sneaks in these little things where you go, shit, yeah, I remember that now. And like, I didn't realise that was the impact it was having or why it was done and that kind of thing. So clearly we'd both recommend this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 4 hours worth of investment, but it's definitely worth it. And then checking out his other stuff as well. I feel a bit sorry for him sometimes because he's become a little bit of a meme, hasn't he? Where people kind of take the piss out of his style and the way he drops random footage in and the music that he uses and stuff. But I think it works really well. I really enjoy his work.
He's only like the Rolling Stones, isn't he? Or he's only like the bit, he's the Coldplay. You're always going to get your critics if you stick to a certain way. We all have a style. He knows that he knows he's a propagandist, and he knows. But he says, I would argue that I am upfront with my emotions. He said, I'm an emotional person. I try and smack you in the face with certain music, certain camera shots. I try and manipulate your emotions, but I do it really upfront. I'm almost saying to you, I'm manipulating you here. Look at this footage with this music and listen to my voice and how sinister I'm saying it. I'm deliberately doing that to make you shocked because I want your attention. I just don't want it to wash over you like any bland documentary does. And that's why he makes them for TV and not movie theatres. Because with TV, it can be carte blanche. And and I had that with my PhD. I tried in my PhD really to bring a new perception to what coaching and psychology is in professional sport. I didn't try and make it about facts because there's loads of facts and rationality out there. So I did it in a bit of a weird style. And I've been slightly criticised for that. Some people thought, what a load of rubbish. Some people thought that's genius. But whatever it is, I've done it in a way that's tried to make it about your life is often more about perceptions, what's going on, than facts about what's happening. Or it's just as much about perceptions, let's say, as it is about facts. When you can open up your perceptions about how things could be this and they could be that opens up different possibilities of how you can envisage your future. That gives you that maybe there's some magic in the world. Curtis is big on conspiracy theories. He thinks conspiracy theories are he knows there's conspiracies happen, but he thinks conspiracy theories are actually people's way of trying to create a bit of mystery and magic back in the world, like at Christmas, and because everything's got so measured and so accurate, like the watches you wear for your steps and everything, and universities and measurement, and everything's compared, isn't it? Oh, the hottest day since that day, and everything's got a measurement on it. What I think, when you can open up your perceptions and watch things like this, you can get wondering again and get a bit like, wow, the world's a bit weird, isn't it? Oh, I wonder what's going to happen, rather than being too boringly factual and measured all the time. And I was trying to put that back into to sport and my PhD. I was trying to get athletes to feel the magic of sport again and the magic of play that you have as a child. That, to a rationalist, that's such, shut up, Danny, what are you on about? You're just being an idiot like there. But you can't describe it. And I think when you watch a Curtis documentary, for me, it gives me that excited feeling again. It gets me like, whoa, what's going on? Whoa, I didn't know that was going on. So there's a bit of that. And that's why I'd recommend it as well to people. It can liven you up a bit.
Do you know why you feel like that when you're watching it?
Why?
All you are is a slave to your inner desires.
I know.